Now, today, we had to put up with the nonsense spectacle that apparently the Labor Party is drawing a line about the behaviour of the Greens. Now, today, both sides of major party politics, well, they turned on the Greens because, in part, they had said that they had enough of what the Greens have been saying when it comes to Gaza, the sort of stuff that ends up giving apparent moral justification to lunatics who have been vandalising the offices of Australian politicians. Now, you do notice that none of these things were being said automatically in our parliament when it wasn't the MPs' offices that were being attacked, when it was just members of the public and a bit of back and forth. Well, you know, it's all part of free speech, right? Well, now that it's hit home, particularly for Labor Party MPs, we got the scenario today where both sides of parliament agreed the Greens are terrible in this area and they use the lowest of issues to make political points in this country. First, Peter Dutton.
We stand as one in this chamber, or we should stand as one to make sure that we condemn the unacceptable levels of anti-Semitism that we see playing out on our streets. It has no place, and we will take every action we need as a chamber to make sure that we condemn those acts of anti-Semitism in our country, and the Greens political party today is properly and rightly condemned.
Albo, in response.
It is unacceptable that misinformation is being consciously and deliberately spread by some Green senators and MPs who have engaged in this in demonstrations outside offices and online.
And then, of course, the Greens got to respond and point the finger at anyone but themselves about the behaviour that has got out of control in the country since October.
I will not be lectured to about peace and non-violence by people who back the invasion of Gaza. Children are dying. Children are dying because the Israeli army has engineered a famine. And instead of talking about the victims, the Prime Minister wants to make it about himself.
Now, interestingly, the Greens leader is not alone in his worldview. We know that about some of the things that have been happening on the streets. But tonight there's a story which is broken on the front page of the Australian newspaper that apparently there are members of the Defence Force, people who are in the Australian Defence Force, who are signing anti-Israel petitions. We're not talking about people from the Human Rights Commission. We are talking about the people who supposedly understand the limits of military power. Now, again, whatever your view on whether the State of Israel and the government of Israel has gone too far, the idea that people inside the Australian Defence Force are trying to side not with the people of Palestine, but of course the military force of Hamas is a disgrace. But of course I don't buy any of this stuff from the Labor Party that, oh, the Greens, they're terrible, aren't they awful, aren't they terrible? Because of course mathematically the Labor Party basically doesn't exist in the federal parliament without the Greens. Now, they won 7 seats on their own outright. 70 of their seats went to preferences, of which the Greens' preferences were the ones that got them over the line. 70 of the 77 members of the federal parliament that are there on the behalf of the Labor Party are also there thanks to the preferences of the Greens. So I will truly believe that the Prime Minister has had enough of the behaviour of the Greens when he decides to put them last. But of course he won't do that because there's this cosy little arrangement where the Greens get to protest yet support the actions of the Labor Party. The Labor Party gets to have a crack at the Greens but takes their preferences. In the Senate they can't get anything done without the Greens, and potentially in a minority parliament they would not be able to even form a government without them. Now, we've had conversations over the years about which political parties are deserving of going last. I do not see how anyone could suggest that the Greens should be anything but last for every major political party. Now, there are people inside the LNP in certain states who think that it's clever to send preferences to the Greens because it's a way of denying the Labor Party seats. This is not acceptable. The Greens are the worst possible choice for Australian politics, no matter what they peddle and what polls tell you that they are the voice of younger generations. For obvious reasons, if you are serious about the threat that the Greens pose, then you should be willing to put some of your own skin in the game. Yes, maybe even 70 seats worth of it. But at some point, the Labor Party should preference the Liberal Party and the Liberal Party should preference the Labor Party before we get to options like the Greens. And again, another example about the doublespeak that comes out of the oh-so-sanctimonious Greens. Now, they constantly tell us that we need more housing, and we do need more housing in the country.
Invest money in building hundreds of thousands of good quality homes to be sold and rented at prices people can actually afford.
In a wealthy country like ours, everyone should have a roof over their head. And one of the key things that governments could do to bring down rents and make sure housing is more affordable is build more public housing.
Everyone has the right to have a roof over their head, especially in a wealthy country like Australia. And so until we build more, the problem's just going to get worse and worse. It's going to get worse.